Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Freely Nourish, the podcast that empowers you to break the cycle of dieting by teaching you to nourish your body well. I am your host, registered dietitian Erin Casey, and I am also the owner of New You Nutrition Counseling, where we believe that you can reach all of your health goals at just about any body size. So if you are ready to let go of that toxic and shameful cycle that is dieting and restriction, please join us. Check out our website. We have lots of options of how to serve you. They range in price, and that is by intention. We have everything from one-on-one counseling, but then we also have digital products. We have, build your own masterclass, pre-recorded options, all kinds of things. So please, whatever it is that you are looking for, I assure you, you can find it there. And of course, if you have any questions about anything that you do find or anything that you don't find but are looking for, you can book a free discovery call with us. It is 100% free, no holds barred. It is just a 15-minute call with me. It can be through a phone call, it can be video call, and it just gives you that opportunity to ask all your questions about working with us, and then also kind of, what nutrition counseling may or may not be able to accomplish for you, what your goals are, all that good fun stuff. So all of that is on the website. It will be linked below. And today I'm actually talking to you about kind of what exactly it is that we do here at New Nutrition. I do these episodes every so often, just because I find that kind of as I gain an influx of new followers on social media, more people are listening to the podcast. I have kind of just all of these questions of people kind of asking like, hey, I'm really like your content, but I'm not quite sure what you do. I'm not sure if it's like something that would help me. And like I just said, it is totally fine for you to book a discovery call and ask all of those questions on a very personal level. I'm happy to address them one-on-one, but I do think it's also beneficial for a lot of folks to just kind of hear it en masse and kind of, the basics of like what a dietitian is, what we do, what we don't do, things of that nature. So if you are currently a New You client, this may not be the episode for you to listen to. You may just want to skip on to the next one. But that said, it also may give you a little bit of verbiage and things to use when you were kind of describing your sessions with me to friends and family and other people that you want to refer. It may give you kind of a little bit of context or like ways to describe what it is I do, that, without having to come up with a verbiage yourself. So I'm happy to have you listen to it, but if you are already rolling with me, then it may not be super beneficial for you. But if you are not, I just wanted to kind of spend a couple of minutes, not so much talking about our products, or our options and things like that. What I wanted to do is really kind of take it back a step a little bit broader and talk about what dietitians do in general. Because yes, as much as I would absolutely love to have you as a client, I would absolutely love for you to work with me, there may be various reasons why you cannot. Cost or insurance coverage may be one of those reasons. Timing between your schedule and my schedule may not line up. Your philosophy and views on food may not align with my philosophies and views on food, and that's totally okay. All of those things are okay. What I am still going to sit here and talk to you about the benefits of seeing a dietitian, no matter who that dietitian is, because honestly, the more I advocate for the profession in the field, the better we are all going to do. So of course, there are good dietitians and bad dietitians, but by and large, most dietitians are good dietitians. And there's a lot of options outside of just working with me that you can benefit from. So I want to kind of spend the majority of today just talking about why I see a dietitian in general, some reasons why you might, some benefits you may gain from it, some options you may not have considered in terms of payment and insurance coverage. And then, obviously I will wrap it up with kind of speaking to how my practice talks about all of these things. But again, I'm always happy to talk to you one-on-one about kind of what we offer, whether or not that's going to meet your goal, that kind of thing. And in those discovery calls, this is more of again, painting with very broad strokes here. So I want to start first by clarifying what a dietitian is. And I think this is something that a lot of people ask me, and I think a lot of people are also embarrassed to ask me, but you shouldn't be. It's a very common question, because there are a lot of folks out in the field that deal with nutrition related things. There is everything from personal trainers, there are dietitians, of course, there are nutritionists, and it can be very easy to get kind of lost in the weeds in terms of like who's who and who does what. And to be honest with you, the answer is that it's actually a very clear distinction. And that is that dietitians, so registered dietitians, those are people who have gone to school for nutrition. So everybody else, so literally it doesn't matter if they call themselves a nutrition coach, a nutritionist, if they don't have that registered dietitian or RD credential, they are not a dietitian. And if they are not a dietitian, I would be very leery about their nutrition knowledge. I will kind of talk about why I mean that in just a second. So registered dietitians have at least a minimum of a bachelor's level degree. That means they've gone to college for at least 4 years studying nothing but nutrition. So they're very much specialists in the field. We work in hospitals. We work in private practice like I do. We are the only ones who can bill insurance. And we're going to talk more about that in just a second. But because, again, that credential matters. And it's not to say that people who don't have the credential don't matter or don't know what they're talking about, but their scope of practice and their knowledge base is limited. So certainly the idea behind dietitians is that we are the nutrition professionals in the medical world. So we have, again, a minimum of a bachelor's degree. Most dietitians now have a master's degree. So that is on par with the level of education that a nurse practitioner or a PA have. So those are kind of both master level physician, or not, I shouldn't say physicians. Those are both master level clinical degrees. Dietetics, for the most part, is also a master's level clinical degree. So we have an extensive education. So we're the ones that know the ins and outs. We are the only ones who are allowed to treat disease with nutrition. So that's the big distinction there. So things like diabetes, heart disease, high cholesterol, things like that, nutrition related illnesses, lots of GI disorders. Those are all things that can only be managed by a dietitian. Where it gets really tricky is weight loss. So technically, obesity is a disease. And if you've been around for a while, you know that I don't fully agree with that assessment, but legally standing, obesity is a disease with a diagnosis code. Because of that, managing weight is considered medical nutrition therapy, which falls under the scope of a dietitian. Now, that's not to say that somebody trying to lose weight who is not clinically obese, that would not fall under medical nutrition therapy. That just counts as weight management. So this is where the water starts to get a little murky. So trainers or nutrition coaches who typically present themselves in like the physical fitness space, they do actually have the capacity to manage things like diet recommendations in the context of like sports performance, and then also in the context of weight management, both gaining and weight loss, assuming the person is not clinically obese. As soon as that clinical obesity becomes a thing, then it's a medical diagnosis, then it should be managed by a dietitian. So I hope that kind of makes sense. Now, I will say that the laws on this are actually different state to state. So what I just told you of like dietitians are the only ones that can clinically manage disease, that is the case in most states. Most states have the registered dietitian title is protected to people. So by that, it means that they will prosecute you if you call yourself a dietitian, but you do not have a credential registered with CDR. They also, the practice of dietetics, so that disease management with nutrition, that is also legally protected and you can be prosecuted for doing so without it. That said, in practice, it happens a lot. And myself and most dietitians I know are very frustrated that we pay large sums of money to governmental bodies that are supposed to regulate those things, and they do not. So that's how people get away with it. And to be honest, a lot of times, like I've met coaches and trainers and things like that who genuinely did not understand that they were doing anything wrong. And it came as a real rude wake up call to them. That said, I will also say, like, I don't want to make this sound like, doom and gloom or super harsh. If you're like a personal trainer, anybody listening to this, like, first of all, feel free to reach out to me. It's like, if you're unsure of your scope of practice, like there are lots of resources I can point you towards, but also most trainers and like fitness professionals that I have met that do nutrition coaching are very well aware of their scope of practice and will be the very first people to say, that sounds like something I'm not quite sure that either I'm allowed to manage or even that I'm just not comfortable managing. And they will refer you to a dietitian. So they know the difference. Most of the time, they know the difference, and they know what they can do and what they can't. And by and large, most of them certainly operate within their scope of practice. Again, it does vary a little bit state to state. So what I just said may not be the case in your state, but there is a really good website, the American Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics actually has a kind of a statewide map that goes through the legislation for each state. So I'll link that below if you are curious, or if you're, again, like a personal trainer listening to this and you just panicked. Please don't. I promise you, you are probably operating within your scope of practice, but just for the general public, that's the distinction. So if it's, if your goals are just trying to, like build muscle, lose fat, and you're not kind of, clinically considered obese, a personal trainer or a nutrition coach may be a perfectly acceptable option for you. But if you have a disease, and then again, if that includes clinical obesity, but also things like, GI disorders like IBS and things of that nature, certainly diabetes, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, any of those types of diseases definitely need to be managed by a dietitian. And it's one of those things that if you are seeing a personal trainer for the management of weight or for muscle building or something like that, but you also have those conditions, I would still recommend you seeing a dietitian, because a dietitian is going to be able to take that full scope. And again, 95% of personal trainers are going to be able to very clearly identify, like, you have these diseases. I really feel like it would be better for you to be managed by a dietitian. So that's the distinction. So basically, if you have, if someone has undergone, 4 full years as a, college student and even had a master's degree, they're considered a registered dietitian. If they do not, they can literally call themselves anything else. They can call themselves a nutritionist. They can call themselves a nutrition coach. There really isn't a whole lot of distinction. The big distinction is just that registered dietitian. So again, if you're looking for disease management, you want a dietitian. That said, I think it's also really important to acknowledge that while there is, again, like fitness professionals and things like that, they are going to have access to, they should be able to kind of discern what is evidence-based research and what is not. Again, I don't sit here and write workout plans for people because I don't know what the evidence says. And that kind of goes both ways when it comes to nutrition and physical fitness. That said, they should be able to kind of tell you the myths versus the reality. But it can be very hard to distinguish. It can certainly be very hard to distinguish if you are a person just kind of going at it alone. And again, not all fitness professionals or even nutrition professionals, not even all dietitians, but most dietitians and nutrition professionals, they don't always operate under what is evidence-based. So dietitians, the reason why we go through so many years of school is that we really kind of delve into what the research says, and they also teach you how to read the new and upcoming research. So as things change and as they evolve, we're all up to date and able to make current recommendations. They also hold us to that. So if I start making bogus recommendations or start saying things that just simply aren't backed by evidence, I lose my license. And that's kind of like, the thing that they hold over your head. And that's what keeps us in line, is that we have something to lose. Again, obviously, I don't want to sit here and do harm to people, but honestly, most people that do harm think they're doing good. And that's kind of the scary part. It's just that it's not regulated. So unless you have that registered dietitian credential, again, there's no regulation whatsoever. So they could basically tell you anything they want. Not that they would, but they could. And I think that's what's really scary in the fitness space to me personally, is that it's just so unregulated. And a lot of this stuff can sound super convincing. And it's not, and it's not true, I guess I should say. So I think that's something to kind of consider as well. Again, I'm not knocking nutrition professionals, and I'm not knocking, fitness professionals who do nutrition coaching. I totally get why it's a one-stop shop. I also totally get that, like, many of them have the education and background and operate within their bounds, but there are some that don't, and that's just the reality of it. So I think it's just kind of important to take that, take things like that with a grain of salt. And again, a dietitian is going to be held to standards and have to, answer truthfully with evidence-based nonsense. So again, it may be something for you as you're kind of starting out and getting started. That may be where you go first, and then you kind of, follow in with your trainer and whatnot going forward. Again, I have a lot of trainers that listen to me. I have a lot of friends who are trainers who text me questions all the time. And they are always, again, there, and I will list them below if you're like looking for good ones. Because again, they're all women, I think. Um, they're and they're all people who will like very much like the second they don't know something or they're not sure, they will ask me, or they will like go find out and like go find out from a legitimate source. So again, the big reason here is just there's so much information. There's just so much information. Half of it's true, most of it's half true, some of it's true, but like only in certain contexts. And it can be exhausting to try to figure that out. It is for me as a nutrition professional who like, this is my bread and butter. This is what I do every single day. It's exhausting for me to try to keep up with it. And so much of it is just complete and utter bullshit. And I hate to say it like that, but it just is. So much of it is just so completely flawed, but also just so deceivingly believable. So I think that if you are starting on any type of journey with your health, it can be really, really helpful to get somebody who has already dug through the weeds themselves, knows what they're talking about, has the educational backing to determine like fact from fallacy, and just kind of have someone who's going to be in your corner. Even if they don't have the answer right away, they're going to know where to go digging to get that answer for you and also translate it for you in a way that is going to apply to your life. I think that's, again, a really big one is understanding the data is one thing, but then understanding what it means for you and how it applies to your life can be really tricky. And that's exactly what we're here to do, which kind of leads me very nicely into my next point, which is this is a service, right? You don't like go to the mechanic and expect them to biopsy the weird mole you have on your back, but you also are taking your car to the mechanic because you don't want to do or don't trust yourself to do whatever it is the mechanic is doing themselves. So, two things there. One is that dietitians have a very clear and a very specific scope of practice that really does not match any other professional. And two, again, you're paying us for a service. I mean, some of you may have someone who comes and cleans your house on occasion, not because you physically can't do it, but because you don't have time. And that's fine, right? So, again, most of us take our car to the mechanic when something goes wrong because I don't know the first thing about cars and I don't want to I could probably YouTube it, but I don't want to waste that much time. I don't want to risk the damage. It's just not worth it to me. It's worth the cost of whatever the mechanic, not whatever the mechanic, but it's worth the cost of the mechanic for most of us to take our car in and have an expert look at it, evaluate it, tell us what's wrong, things like that. This is no different, right? Your body is the car in this case, right? And we're going to take all the pieces, we're going to look at it, and we're going to give you a plan of action of what's going to work best for you. That saves you time, that saves you stress, that saves you confusion, and it saves you from believing misinformation that you maybe otherwise would have thought was true. So, and again, it doesn't even have to be like as elaborate as like a mechanic or something that you're that dependent on. Most of us, myself included, have somebody else cut our hair or dye our hair. Most of us have, um, someone to clean our teeth, and you go to the doctor for other things. So things like that. This is just routine maintenance. I totally understand that like cost can be a barrier for some people, and we're going to talk about that in just a second. But again, when you think about the services that you pay people for, and honestly, even how much money you pay those people, dietitians by comparison are actually pretty cheap considering the value we bring to you. So considering the time, the agony, how much, thought and stress and effort. And honestly, how many times is all of that going to make you give up and not do anything at all? These are all factors, right? So me, for example, personally, like I could write my own lifting program. Like I could do it. I have enough of a knowledge base. I've been at it for years, but the reality is I don't want to. It would take me agonizing over numbers. It would take more creativity and brain space than I currently have. I very much gladly pay my trainer a certain amount of money every single month, and she writes my programs for me. And all I have to do is just log into the app and go into the gym and do it. Because for me, getting into the gym and actively doing it is enough. That's all I am capable of doing. If I had to think about it too, that would take away from something else. So for me, that cost is worth it. Now, that said, I do want to be completely clear, and I understand that cost may be a barrier for you, right? Like some of us, myself included, like will forego haircuts or dye jobs or whatever, or even the mechanic because we're afraid of the cost. And I totally understand that. But the beauty of registered dietitians being those people who are actually, we're clinicians, where we have a degree, we have a credential, we are regarded as clinicians, we can also bill insurance. And that can open up a lot of doors for people. Now, obviously, you have to have insurance, and for the most part, it has to be kind of good insurance. But by and large, again, it varies state to state, it will vary plan to plan. But by and large, the coverage is actually pretty good because the data we've been able to produce over the last, I don't know, say 5 or 6 years, is that preventative measures, including nutrition, save the healthcare costs in the end, right? So they save you from hospitalizations, they save you from more medications, they save you from other things that are ultimately going to cost that insurance company money. Now, I don't love insurance. We know this. I think it's a scam, and I think that they are criminal in what they do and get away with, and how they have completely both monopolized and manipulated our entire healthcare system. That said, we had them. Let's use them to our advantage, right? So a lot of healthcare plans, and again, you have to check with your provider, you'll have to check with your specific policy, but most often nutrition counseling is actually covered as a preventative cost, which means that your deductible doesn't even apply. If your deductible does apply, then yeah, you have to meet your deductible before it will kick in to cover the nutrition visits. But that said, I mean, there's still a lot of wiggle room in there. There's not like, there used to be like set, you could only see people so many times a year, you could only have so many visits a month and things like that. They've loosened most of those guidelines, at least in any of the insurance companies I contract with. And now, now they're actually widely, they cover a good amount because honestly, the nutrition, they don't pay us enough. So it's cheap to them, but it can give you a huge benefit, and it may be at little or no cost to you. So it's definitely worth looking into. And again, that's kind of why I wanted to pitch this episode as kind of a like a broad strokes kind of advocating for dietitians and the field of nutrition in general, because if you don't live in Kentucky, I can't bill your insurance. So that's kind of the drawback there. Myself personally, I do also do sliding scale payments. So based on your income, I will kind of lower my cash pay price based on where you're at currently. That's something I do. I know many other practitioners who do that as well. So even if your insurance doesn't cover it, or like it does, but there's a high deductible situation, there may be options. So it's worth asking for dietitians in your area if there is like a cash pay or a sliding scale option as well. And then we kind of, we get into kind of the basics of other things that dietitians can do for you. So, like I said, initially not knowing what to do. There's so much misinformation out there. I also have a lot of people on my caseload who they know what to do, or they have at least a general sense, but they struggle to do it. And this is where I want to kind of sink my teeth in for just a couple of minutes. Because I think this really gets to the meat and potatoes of like what a dietitian, or honestly, in some cases, even a good coach or a trainer can do for you too, is that behavior change counseling, right? So I, am never going to judge you for not knowing what to do, but I'm also not going to judge you if you do know what to do, or even I've told you what to do, but it's just somehow not happening. My job is not to judge you in that case. My job is to figure out, okay, why is it not happening? And how can we work around that? Or how can we work through that? What other solutions can we come up with to help address whatever the barriers are? Because your barriers are going to be very different to somebody else's. And even though like nutritionally, what you both need may be the same thing, the way in which you get there may be different. And that is my job as a counselor, to help you figure that out and just serve as your partner in it. We are literally kind of getting in the weeds with you and walking you through it and how to do it. And that may take some trial and error still, but that's there for you. It's a much more of a counseling relationship. I have several patients who kind of say, you're almost like my therapist, because there's a lot of emotion in food. Now, I want to be clear, my scope of practice is not that of a therapist, but we talk about things like emotions. We talk about things like body image. We talk about things like stress eating. We talk about things like stress management. We talk about time management. We talk about coping skills. So we talk about all of these things as they pertain to food and eating, because all of this is just human behavior. Eating is just another human behavior. Um, which I don't think we really think about it that way. I think a lot of times we kind of think of it as like a morally good, or there's a right and a wrong, but it's just a behavior like any other behavior. And like any other behavior, it is modifiable. You just have to find somebody who's going to be able to tap into your motivations, your interests, your likes, your dislikes, etc. So that's another really big reason. Even in people who are fairly well educated on nutrition and have a basic idea of what to do, if you're really just struggling to figure out how to get it done, honestly, a session or two with a dietitian may be all you need to kind of put yourself on the right path. You may also need some like ongoing counseling about it to kind of either for accountability, for support, for continued education. All of those things are perfectly good uses of a dietitian's time. And I think sadly, what I hear a lot is that they almost don't want to waste my time with those kinds of things. And it's just kind of like, that's exactly what I do. That's what I'm here for. And they just kind of feel like, well, if I can Google it, why would I waste your time with it? I would assume that that's how a lot of you also feel about like your doctors and stuff like that. Like, you should never be afraid to ask your doctor a question about your health. And I would encourage you to ask your doctor over Google. And nutrition's the exact same way. I think people don't realize how clinical it actually is. And they don't recognize that there's the reason why I have a whole ass degree, multiple degrees in it actually, is because it's complicated and there isn't a straightforward answer. And Google may or may not reflect that, but it can be really hard and you can get lost really fast when like, hi, I'm right here. I have the answer for you. And if I don't have the answer, I know where to find it. And if there isn't a clear answer, I will talk you through what information is available and you can kind of come to your own conclusions. So again, if you don't know what to do, we're right here. If you do know what to do and it's just not happening, we're right here. And then, if you just don't like your relationship with food, that's another big one, right? If you just feel like I know that I'm not quite eating right, but I don't know what's wrong. I don't know how to fix it. We are right here for you. That is exactly what we do all day, every day. And like so much of that like that relationship with food comes from the misinformation that we're exposed to. It comes from diet culture. It comes from just straight up lies that are purported all over the media, social media, etc. So again, just like clearing out that mud and giving you kind of a basic understanding of what's good nutrition, what's not good nutrition. And that's going to be entirely dependent on you. What I say is good nutrition for one person is going to be totally different than what I say is good for nutrition for another person. So I want to kind of, making those distinctions, building those connections, kind of getting that understanding, but then also kind of getting that plan of action of how do I put it into practice? And okay, I tried that and that didn't work. What should I try next? All of that is what we are trained to do for you. And like I said, it is a service like any other. It is just like paying a trainer to build your workouts for you. It's just like paying a hairstylist to cut and color your hair. It is just like paying a mechanic to fix your car. It is like paying a therapist to unpack your emotions. It is like paying a doctor to manage your medications and make diagnoses and get diagnostics and all the other stuff that doctors do. They do so much stuff. But all of that is what we are here to do for you. So like I said, if you have any questions about like my specific practice, I'm more than happy I'm going to put the website link below, but by all means, book a discovery call. I am more than happy to talk about it with you one-on-one. But otherwise, I hope this has given you just kind of a little bit of an inside scoop as to what we do as dietitians. I hope it helps clear the mud. I know it's so confusing out there, but yeah, let me know if you guys need more of this. Otherwise, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your week and I will see you next time.